really suffering, it's a wonderful thing to let them go. Remember, years and years ago, there was a couple, Jenny and Steve. Jenny was an Australian nurse, Steve was from the United States. And he had made his own very successful business, taking people white water rafting around the world. He was such a fit and strong man, very skilled in these little inflatable boats, going to these remote parts of the world, doing white water rafting. Not only did he enjoy his life, but also he made a lot of money as well. And it just happens that even the fittest people, they also get sick. And he got cancer, and it was incurable. And so in his last months, I would go and visit him in the little unit over in Perth, as he got closer and closer and closer to death. And there was one occasion when I went to see him that I realized there was something wrong. That he was very sick and should be very close to dying, but he wasn't. He was lingering on a stage of dying and not making any more progress. And I realized what was going on. And I turned around to his wife, Jenny. I looked at her and said, Jenny, have you given your husband permission to go yet? And she looked at me and didn't say a word. She actually understood that I had hit the nail on the head. She climbed on the bed, put her hands around her husband Steve, and said, darling, I give you permission to die. You don't have to struggle so hard to stay alive for me. I love you so much, and I let you go. It was one of those wonderful events where I just stood back and watched them kiss, watched them embrace, and watched them show such amazing love, and they let each other go. And a couple of days later, he died. He thought that one of the worst things he could possibly do to the woman he loved the most in life was to make her sad by dying. And that's what was keeping him struggling in this cancer-ridden body, painful, weak, with no prospect. And that's all he needed, permission from the person he loved to let go and let nature take its course. And from that time on, I've often asked people that if you have a loved one who is dying, and if they're very, very close, and you feel that something is stopping them from being released from their aching, sick, and tired body, please go up to them and give them permission to die. Because sometimes not doing that is keeping them in a prison of pain when they really should be letting go and going on to a new life. And I know that that also happened to a monk over in our monastery in England many years ago. I knew that monk because I grew up with him in Thailand. And we were very good friends because he was from Oxford and I was from Cambridge. We joked with each other that we're supposed to be enemies. But we were the best of friends. And he was from Tennessee. And when he was in Thailand, he got 2 strains of typhoid at the same time. He survived that illness, but he had, I think, Crohn's disease as a result, which meant he was very, very sick. And we sent him to our monastery in England because we thought that he'd get better medical treatment in the UK than in Thailand at that time, 30 years or so ago. And at the monastery in England, he had the very best of medical care. Both the normal type of medicine and all alternative therapies, but nothing worked. For a couple of years, he was bedridden, staying in an attic room of this monastery. And I remember going to see him and seeing this person who was a Rhodes Scholar, who was a champion wrestler in Tennessee, just wasted with hardly any energy. As he told me, his sickness was so bad that for days, for weeks, he was in bed. And on a good day, he tried to get out of the room for exercise, could only make it to the doorway before he collapsed and had to crawl back into bed. That's how weak he was. and it was the abbot of that monastery, that was Ajahn Brahmavamso. He had a moment of inspiration and insight. He went up to that monk's room after he'd been in it for a couple of years. Went up to the room, just the two of them. And he said to this ex-wrestler Rhodes scholar, whose body was wasted and so weak, he said, I've come up here on behalf of all the monks and the nuns in this monastery, on behalf of all the people who support us and all the people who love you and care for you. On behalf of all those people, I've come up here to give you permission to die. Stop trying so hard to get better. At which the monk started crying and weeping. He wept and wept and wept, and from that day on, he started to get better. That was about, it was about 30 years ago, 25 years ago now, and he's still alive, living in South Africa now. What a great story that is. You understand the psychology? We try so hard to get better, it makes us sick. Instead of just, as I've been telling all you in the meditation retreat, letting go and relaxing, and then you find there's a much better chance of healing when you're stopping fighting so desperately to get better, to please other people. So when a person is dying, please give them permission to die, because the psychology is, the worst thing I can possibly do to the people who look after me and care for me, who've done so much for me, is to make them sad and make them cry by dying. And that's a great stress on the person who is dying. In fact, the person who is dying, they have two problems. One is their own physical pain and sickness. The other is their relations. Relations often make it much worse for them. When you go into the room and you start crying, oh, you're dying, it's so sad. Imagine that was you dying there. That's the last thing you want, other people's problems. You've got enough problems on your own to look after. That was one reason why I remember just counselling an Australian girl who was a Tibetan Buddhist nun. As I say, that I don't care what tradition you are from. If you're a Buddhist, you're my friend, and I'll look after you, and we'll be mates. All this separation between different sects and types of Buddhism, I don't agree with that at all. But anyway, she was a Tibetan Buddhist nun, I was a Theravada monk, and I was counselling her, and one day I got a call from her. She was in the hospice in Perth. And the call said that I really think I'm going to go soon. I'm going to die soon. Can you please come? People know when they're going. She actually died, I think, 36 hours later. And I knew that she was not faking this. So I stopped what I was doing, got a car, and sort of was driven all the way from my monastery, about an hour and a half, to the place where the hospice was. Now, when you go to a hospice when people are that sick, you can't just barge into their room. I had to check in with the duty nurse, first of all. I said my name, I said the name of the person I wanted to visit, and she checked the register and she said, I'm terribly sorry, this woman has asked for no visitors. And I said, that cannot be right. She just called me an hour and a half ago and requested me to come immediately. And the nurse got angry with me. She said, we must respect the patient's wishes. And I said, but I've come all the way from this Serpentine, an hour and a half away, and she told me to come. And the nurse glared at me. And she said, come with me. So I followed her. And on the room, the bedroom where this Tibetan nun was staying, there was a big sign on the door. Absolutely no visitors. And she read it out to me, see, absolutely no visitors. And she was very pleased with herself that she'd actually told me off. But I've got very good eyes. I looked at the bottom and there was some other words scrawled in small print. And those words were,